Peace. This is Journey Coaching with Ross. I am Ross Davis L. And this is a continuation of the breakdown of Man and His Symbols by Dr. Carl Jung. And we are picking up on the individualization process. Right. See if my screen will catch up. All right. The Process of Individualization by Dr. von Franz. What is the purpose of the total dream life of a person? What role what role do dreams play in the immediate psyche of humans in the life as whole? Jung discovered that all dreams are relevant in varying degrees to the life of the dreamer and a part of a web of psychological factors. They seem to follow a pattern he called the process of individualization. Gradually, a more mature personality emerges and by degrees becomes effective and visible to others. Psychic growth is not done consciously by effort of willpower, but is an involuntary and natural process. This process is only as real as the person is aware of it and makes a conscious connection with it. The organizing center of our psyche, in our psychic simple system, Jung called the self, and it is the totality of the whole psyche in order to distinguish from the ego, which is a small part of it. It's defined as an inner guiding factor that is different from the conscious personality and grasped only through studying one's dreams, appearing first as an inborn impossibility. As an inborn possibility. How far it is developed is it depends on if the ego is willing to listen to the messages of the self. If so, such person becomes a more complete human being. It seems the ego wants not was not made by nature to follow its own impulses to an unlimited extent, but to help make the psyche whole. The ego lights the entire psyche, allowing it to become conscious and be realized. The totality of the psyche is not the same as a wholeness that is fully realized and lived. To fulfill one's destiny is the greatest human achievement. It is useless to look at how someone else is developing because each of us have a unique way of self-realization. Even though many human problems are similar, they are never identical. The first approach of the unconscious. The process of individualization is the conscious coming to terms with our own inner self, generally beginning with the wound to the personality and suffering that is attached to it. This shock is a call, though often overlooked, because the ego feels blocked in its will or desire and usually projects the obstruction onto something external. When we are seeking something that is impossible to find or about which nothing is known, and we focus our attention on the unconscious without assumptions or emotional rejection, it often breaks through with the flow of helpful symbolic images. but not always. Sometimes it offers a series of painful realizations of what is wrong with us and our conscious attitude first. Then we must accept the truth. The realization of the shadow. If the unconscious is initially positive or negative, we eventually must readapt the conscious attitude in a better way to the unconscious factors, meaning to accept the criticism from the unconscious. Through dreams, you become acquainted with aspects of your personality that you prefer not to look at closely. Jung called this the realization of the shadow. The shadow represents unknown or little known attributes and qualities of the ego. In some respects, it can consist of collective factors that stem from outside of our personal life. The shadow is exposed to collective infections to a greater degree than the conscious personality. In dreams, the shadow appears as a person of the same sex as a dreamer. When people observe their own unconscious tendencies in other people, this is called a projection. Projections obscure our view of others. Also, by projecting our shadow, a part of our own personality stays on the opposing side. As a result, we unconsciously sabotage ourselves. If we realize the projection and discuss matters without fear or hostility, dealing with others sensibly, there is a chance of mutual understanding. If the shadow is a friend or enemy depends on ourselves. The shadow becomes hostile when ignored or misunderstood. The shadow figure contains valuable vital forces and should be assimilated into actual experience and not repressed. It is up to the ego to give up its pride and live out what seems dark but is not. One of the biggest problems in the process of individualization is recognizing our shortcomings and challenges. Somewhere within our being, we generally know where we should go and what to do. But at times, the I behaves in a distracting fashion that the inner voice cannot be heard. Sometimes we do not understand the hints of the unconscious, and we must have the courage to do what seems right, while being ready to change our course if suggestions from the unconscious comes. To determine good from evil, we get power from the great man. But it seems the ego wants to make a free choice, or that the self depends on human consciousness and its decision to help him become manifest. Each man must determine what is right for him. The fact that recognition of our unconscious reality involves honest self examination and reorganization of our life causes many to continue to behave the same. The anima, the woman within. All men have a female personification of his unconscious. Often, this figure shows up after the shadow, bringing its own problems to deal with. The anima is a personification of all feminine psychological tendencies in a man's psyche. It is his relation to the unconscious, often depicted as a witch or priestess. The character of a man's anima, as a rule, is shaped by his mother. If he feels his mother had a negative influence on him, his anima will often express itself in irritable, depressed moods, uncertainty, insecurity, and touchiness. But if he is able to overcome this, it will serve to reinforce his masculinity. The French refer to such as a femme fatale. The effects of a negative anima in a man are in his effeminate remarks used to devalue everything. If a man's experience with his mother is positive, the anima becomes effeminate or is preyed upon by women and unable to cope with life or turn him into a sentimentalist or become touchy. The effects of positive anima is a dialogue that stops a man from getting in touch with life and his decisions. He reflects about life so much that he cannot live. The most frequent depiction of the anima is in a form of erotic fantasy. All the aspects of the anima can be projected so they appear to a man to be qualities of a particular woman. It is the anima that causes a man to fall suddenly in love when he sees a woman for the first time. A solution is to recognize anima as an inner power. The aim of the unconscious is to force a man to develop and to bring his own being to maturity by integrating more of his unconscious personality and bringing it into his real life. Beneficial aspects of the anima is responsible for a man to find the right marriage partner. Whenever a man's logical mind is incapable of discerning facts hidden in the unconscious, the anima helps. The anima also guides or mediates to the inner world of the self. The self normally expresses itself in a fourfold structure. The number four is connected to the anima because there are four stages of its development. Eve, which is pure instinctual and biological relation. There's Faust, a book by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Helen, Faust's Helen of Troy in Homer's Iliad. It equals a romantic and aesthetic level of, but still sexual. Then there's the Virgin Mary, which is a figure who raises love or eros to a spiritual devotion. It's relatedness. Sapientia, or Songs of Solomon, it's wisdom. In modern times, this state is rarely reached. What does the role of the anima as a guide to inner world mean in practical terms? The positive function The positive function occurs when a man takes seriously the feelings, moods, expectations, and fantasies sent by his anima, and when he fixes them in some form. Worship of the anima brings disadvantages that she loses her individual aspect. If she is regarded as an exclusively personal being, there is danger that if projected into the outer world, only there she can be found and can create trouble because man becomes the victim of his erotic fantasies or compulsively depending on one actual woman. The animus, the man within. The male personification of the unconscious in women has good and bad aspects, often appearing as a hidden conviction. A favorite theme of the animus is the only thing that I want in the world is love, and he doesn't love me. Or in this situation, there are only two possibilities, and both are equally bad. The animus does not deal with exceptions. You can rarely contradict an animus opinion because it is usually right in the general sense, but rarely fits the situation. The animus is shaped by a woman's father, giving true convictions that never include her personal reality of the woman as she is. He personifies thoughts of how things ought to be, which cut women off from reality. By holding secret destructive attitudes, a wife can drive her husband and mother her children into illness, accident, or death, and may keep children from marrying. There can be a lack of or feeling of insecurity that can lead to unconscious animus opinion and its attached thoughts and feelings. The ego then identifies with them and becomes attached. After the attachment ends, a woman will realize her actions were not aligned with what she genuinely wanted. The animus contains good qualities that can help the self through its creativity, through its creativity. When appearing as a group of men, the unconscious symbolizes a collective element. Due to collective mindedness, women refer to one or they or everybody, and their speech contains always and should and ought. There are many stories of a prince turned into a wild animal or monster by witchcraft who is redeemed by the love of a girl, a process symbolizing the manner which the animus becomes conscious, implying that by blindly trusting and loving him, she will redeem her bridegroom. However, she always breaks her promise and finally finds her love again after a quest and much suffering. Meaning in life that the conscious attention women give to their animus problem takes a lot of time and involves suffering. But if they realize who and what their animus is and what he does to her, and if she faces realities, her animus can be an inner companion who endows her with masculine qualities of initiative, courage, objectivity, and spiritual wisdom. The animus has four stages of development: physical power, possess, possesses initiative and capacity for planned action, and becomes the Word, appearing as a professor or clergyman, and finally the incarnation of meaning, or a mediator of religious experience, whereby life acquires new meaning. This can make her more receptive than a man to new creative ideas. The inner man in women can lead to marital troubles like the animal. What complicates things is when one partner is possessed by the anima or animus. It can cause the other partner to become possessed by theirs. The anima and animus tend to lower conversation to a level and produce disagreeable and emotional atmosphere. Women must question their own convictions before they can take in the suggestions of the unconscious. The self, the symbol of totality. After integrating the animal and animus, the subconscious changes symbolic form to represent the self, the innermost nucleus of the psyche. In a woman's dream, this may present as a superior female figure, a priestess, sorceress, earth mother, or goddess. In a man's dream, this may present as a masculine initiator and guardian, a wise old man, a spirit of nature. The self does not always present as a wise old man or woman. These are attempts to express something young and old. Human form is one way the self is depicted in dreams. The self is with us throughout life and exists beyond conscious life. It is omnipresent, appears as a person who embraces and contains the whole cosmos. When we see this, we can look for a creative solution to conflict because the psyche center is activated to overcome the difficulty. It is often perceived as bisexual or androgynous, or both male and female. The natural manifestation of the center of the psyche are characterized by four foldings, having four divisions. People soon realize the cosmic man as an inner psychic image, his beginning and end of all life, according to testimony and myths. Man's main purpose is to be human. Never forget our outer reality exists as far as we perceive it consciously, and we cannot prove that it exists in and by itself. Active imagination is a technique discovered by Jung. It's similar to Eastern meditation. The difference is the meditator has no conscious goal or program. Thus, meditation becomes an experiment of the free individual, which is opposite of a guided attempt to master the unconscious. The self, often symbolized as an animal, represents the instinctive nature and connectedness with our surroundings. All higher manifestations of life somehow turn to the surrounding space-time continuum. Time rhythm plays a part too. In the civilized world, most dreams revolve around the ego developing the right attitude towards herself. The self also appears as a crystal. The precise arrangement of a crystal evokes in us the intuitive feeling that is so-called dead matter. There is a spiritual ordering at work, often symbolizing the union of matter and spirit. You are the philosopher's stone. It usually takes prolonged suffering to remove the superficial psychic elements, but some meaningful inner experience of self is experienced by most people in a lifetime. From a psychological view, genuine religious attitude consists of an effort to discover and to keep in tune with this unique experience. So the self becomes an inner partner that our attention is continually turned. Studying the connection may prove the psyche and matter are the same observed from within and without. Dr. Jung created new concepts called synchronicity, which is a meaningful coincidence of outer and inner events that are causally connected, that are not causally connected. Emphasis on meaningful. Dr. Jung observed whenever meaningful coincidences in a person's life there was an archetype active in the subconscious of the person concerned. These events accompany crucial phases of the process of individualization that have been overlooked. The relation to the self. More people living in large cities suffer from emptiness and boredom. The only worthwhile adventure lies within our own minds. There has been a rise of Eastern practices like yoga that focuses the mind inward. Trying to give the self constant attention daily is like living in two different worlds. There are two reasons men lose contact with the self. There's a single instinctive drive or emotional image, which can carry him into a one sided view. This can also happen to animals, and where excessive daydreaming is a threat because they connect men with their complexes and threaten the concentration and continuity of his consciousness. And also, over consolidation of the ego consciousness. It can block the reception of impulses and messages coming from the self. Jung turned a structure with four parts of order as a representative of the self, as a mandala from the Hindus. Contemplation on one is meant to bring inner peace. Landscapes and dreams often symbolize an inexpressible mood in dreams. Psychologically, right often means consciousness, adaptation of being right, while left is unadapted, unconscious, reactions or sinister. Roundedness symbolizes a natural wholeness. Quadrangular shape is realized consciousness. Whenever a person genuinely turns to inner world and tries to know themselves, the self eventually emerges. This is difficult. Every personification of the unconscious has a light and dark side. The dark side of the self is the most dangerous of all, as it is a source of the power of the psyche. Imitation of others makes you miss your target and stagnates you psychologically. To follow in steps of someone is to attempt to live. To follow in the steps of someone is attempts to live our lives with the same sincerity and devotion of the leader. To understand symbolic indications of the unconscious, you must stay emotionally balanced. It is important to the ego to function as normally as possible, and by having an incomplete consciousness, you become receptive to the unconscious. How can a person stand the tension of feeling connected to the universe and at the same time he is only human? The social aspect of the self. Growth of inner city populations has a depressing effect on us. It gives the feeling that our lives do not count. This is when turning attention inward is most effective. Sometimes we have strong feelings that the great man wants something from us and sets us up for a special task. Our response is our response to this experience can help us gain strength to go against the collective norms by taking our own soul seriously. This is not always an agreeable task. You must expect interference with conscious plans because your will is caused by other intentions that we must submit to or at least consider. When we try to obey the unconscious, we are unable to do as we please and equally unable to do what others want. Often we separate from groups to find ourselves. That is why it is said that attending to the unconscious makes people antisocial and egocentric. As a rule, that is not true. It's little known factors that enter this attitude. The collective aspect of the self. A person who follows their dreams for a considerable time will find that they are not often concerned with relationships, that they are often concerned with relationships with others. If a dream picks up the image of another person, there are two reasons why. Either it's a projection of dreamers' inner aspects, or the dream is telling us about a person. To differentiate this requires an honest attitude and careful thought. Ultimately, the self orders and regulates human relationships, and this is how spiritually in tune and similarly oriented people find each other. In turn, the process of individualization changes our relationships. All activities and obligations that belong exclusively to the outer world do harm to the activities of the unconscious. Can the unconscious be influenced? Only by interpreting our dreams and confronting what they say can we change the unconscious. At times, the unconscious uses a motif from the external world and seems to be influenced by it. From studying the social behavior of higher level animals, around 10 to 50, gives an idea of the best living conditions, and man is similar. The present understanding of the process of individualization, the self tends to produce small groups while simultaneously creating defined ties of feelings between certain individuals and feelings of relatedness to all people. Only positive connections created by the self can one ensure that negative projections will not break up the group. So, devotion to your process of individualization brings the best social adaptations. This does not mean the difference. This does not mean difference of opinion and conflicting obligations on what's right will not arise. Fanatical political activity is incompatible with the process of individualization. Only if you use your freedom to create something meaningful is it relevant that you should be free. That is why finding inner meaning of life is more important to the individual than anything, and why the process of individualization is given priority. Nearly all religious systems contain images to symbolize the individualization process, or at least a stage of it. The self is projected as a Christ figure. There are two basic aspects of Mandela's symbolism: restore a previous existing order, give expression and form to something that does not, or to give expression and form to something that does not exist. What restores the old order simultaneously involves an element of new creation. The new order contains the old order, but on a higher level. From a psychological view, as far as religion, humans divided into three types: those who genuinely believe their religious doctrines, those who lost their faith and replaced it with pure, conscious, rational opinions, and 50-50, which believes in their religious traditions. To take the unconscious seriously is a matter of personal courage and integrity.